I matched with her on a dating app. She sent me a 1998 file. The rain has not stopped for 4 days. When you live on the top floor of an old brick building near the docks, the sound of water hitting the tin roof becomes a heartbeat. It fills the rooms. It settles into the corners of your mind until you cannot remember what absolute silence feels like. My name is Julian. I work from home as a freelance photo restorer. People send me their damaged family histories. Faded prints from the 1920s, torn wedding albums, silver gelatin plates cracked by moisture. My job is to sit in the dark with a high-resolution stylus and patch the digital holes. I fix the memories of strangers. It is quiet work, but lately, the isolation has started to warp my perception of time. I look out my window at night and see the yellow streetlights reflecting in the black puddles down on the empty pavement. No one walks down there after midnight. To break the routine, I downloaded a localized dating application last month. It was a small, independent platform called Nearby, mostly used by people in the Pacific Northwest who prefer a slower, less commercial interface. I'm not a social person by nature, but the empty space in my apartment had grown too large to ignore. For the first 3 weeks, my profile received very little traction. A few polite conversations that dissolved after a day or two. But on a Tuesday night around 2 o'clock in the morning, the application vibrated against my desk. I had matched with a profile named Elena. Her profile was minimalist. There was no bio, no list of interests, no linked social media accounts. There was only a single, heavily compressed image. The photograph was strange. It was a low-resolution shot of what looked like a domestic living room from the late 1990s. The wallpaper had a vertical green stripe pattern, common in suburban homes of that era. In the center of the frame, sitting on a dark patterned rug, was a large dog. It appeared to be a Siberian husky or a similar breed, but the lighting was incredibly poor. The image had a heavy, unnatural red tint, like it had been taken under a darkroom lamp or near a glowing neon sign. The dog was staring directly into the camera lens. Its mouth was slightly open, revealing a row of sharp, pale white teeth that seemed too large for its jaw. It looked like it was mimicking a human expression, a wide, fixed grin. I assumed the photo was a joke, a bit of internet irony from someone who used a vintage aesthetic to stand out on a dating app. I swiped open the message terminal. Elena had already sent a message. It appeared on my screen in clean, lowercase letters. "Hello, Julian. I like your profile picture. You look like someone who knows how to keep a secret." I typed a response back immediately. I wrote, "Thanks. I restore old photos for a living, so secrets are basically my business. Is that your dog in the picture?" The response took less than 5 seconds to print on the glass. "He does not belong to me. He just stays in the room. The application is glitching tonight. It will not let me upload my actual face. Can I send you a direct file link instead?" I hesitated for a moment. As a technician, I am always suspicious of external links on unverified platforms. It is the easiest way to inject a Trojan or a remote access protocol into a local system. But my curiosity was greater than my caution. The isolation makes you stupid. It makes you compromise your own rules just to keep a voice talking to you in the dark. I sent her my secure work email address. "Send it here. My server filters out malicious scripts, so don't try anything weird." She didn't reply on the app, but within 2 minutes my dual monitor setup on my work desk flickered. A new message had arrived in my encrypted inbox. The sender address was an unindexed string of characters. User 864 at unallocated net. The subject line was empty. There was no body text. There was only a single attachment named Face Reconstruction, TGA. A TGA file is a targa-graphic format. It is rarely used by modern smartphones or digital cameras. It is an old industrial image format from the late 80s, mostly used for high-end graphic cards and early video game textures. It stores raw raster data without compression. I saved the file into an isolated sandbox folder on my drive. I ran a command line security scan. The file structure was clean. No malicious macro, no hidden executable payload. It was pure image data. I opened the file in my primary editing software. The screen did not display a woman's face. Instead, it was the exact same image from her dating profile, but in its raw, uncompressed resolution. The detail was terrifyingly sharp. The red tint was gone. Now the image had a cold, clinical flash photography glare. The dog on the rug was larger than I had realized. Its fur was patchy, missing in small clumps around its shoulders, revealing gray, leathery skin beneath. Its eyes were not canine. They were perfectly round, white spheres with tiny, pinpoint black pupils that were fixed directly on the point where the camera lens had been. But it was the mouth that made me pull my hands back from the keyboard. The mouth was stretched open in a horizontal line that reached almost to the base of its ears. The teeth were not the pointed fangs of a carnivore. They were human bicuspids and incisors, arranged in a crowded, overlapping row. They were wet with a thick, dark saliva that clung to the pink gums. The expression was a perfect, malevolent human smile. It looked like someone had taken a human jawbone and forced it inside the muzzle of a dying animal. I sat in my chair for a long time. The sound of the rain outside seemed to drop in pitch, turning into a low, rumbling hum. I looked at the metadata of the Targa file. I needed to see when this thing was captured. The creation date line in the hex editor was corrupted. It did not list a standard Gregorian calendar date. It printed a sequence of characters that read, runtime error 0314. I told myself it was an advanced digital art project, a clever composite made by an experienced Photoshop user who wanted to create a modern urban legend. People used to do that all the time on old forums like 4chan. They called them creepypastas. This was just a high-fidelity remake of the classic smile dog image that went viral back in the late 2000s. I opened my phone to text Elena on the nearby application. I wanted to tell her that her graphic design skills were impressive, but the joke was over. When I opened the app, my inbox was empty. The conversation with Elena had completely disappeared. I checked my match list. Her profile was gone. There was no record of her user identification number anywhere in the local cache of the application. The system log indicated that I had 0 active matches. I laughed out loud in the empty room. It was a nervous, dry sound. I figured she had unmatched me right after sending the email. A classic hit-and-run troll. I closed the phone and laid it face down on my desk. I moved my mouse pointer over to the editing software to delete the sandbox folder containing the Targa file. I clicked the delete button. A system alert window popped up in the center of my monitor. Action cannot be completed because the file is currently open in another program. I checked my task manager. No other applications were running, only the editing software. I forced the software to close. I tried to drag the folder into the recycling bin again. The same alert window appeared. Action cannot be completed because the file is currently open in System Core. I stared at the warning box. System Core is a protected partition of the operating system. An image file should never be executed within the kernel layer of a computer. It has no structural purpose there. I decided to leave it alone until morning. My eyes were burning from the monitor glare. I turned off the power strips under my desk. The dual monitors went black. The cooling fans of my main rig wound down to a silent stop. The room plunged into absolute darkness, except for the faint, green glow of the digital clock on my microwave across the studio apartment. It said 03:14 a.m. I walked over to my bed. I pulled the blanket over my shoulders. I closed my eyes and tried to let the sound of the rain soothe my nerves. 10 minutes passed. Then I heard a sound that did not belong to the rain. It was coming from the corner of the room where my desk sat. A very soft, wet sound, like a dog cleaning its paws in the dark. A rhythmic, sliding sound of a tongue moving over flesh. Lap, lap, lap. I sat up instantly. My heart was slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Who's there?" I called out. My voice sounded tiny in the dark. The lapping sound stopped immediately. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. My fingers were shaking so much I dropped it onto the floorboards. It landed face up. The screen illuminated the ceiling with a pale, cold light. I leaned over the edge of the bed to pick it up. As the light from the phone screen swept across the floor, it hit the base of my computer desk. Sitting on the hardwood floor, directly beneath my main monitor, was a shadow. It wasn't a normal shadow cast by a piece of furniture. It was a dense, physical patch of blackness that had a distinct outline. The shape of a large, crouched animal, a dog with its head lowered between its shoulders. I clicked the side button on my phone to turn on the built-in flashlight. I pointed the beam directly at the desk. There was nothing there, just the empty space under the table, the tangled black power cords, and my plastic footrest. I let out a long breath. I was hallucinating from the lack of sleep. The stress of my job, the endless hours staring at pixels, the creepy Targa file. It had created a temporary psychotic spike in my brain. That was the only rational explanation. The human mind is a pattern recognition machine. If you feed it a disturbing image in the dark, it will project that image onto the shadows of your room. I kept the flashlight on as I lay back down. I didn't turn it off. I laid the phone on my chest, pointing the beam directly at the ceiling. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When the gray morning light finally filtered through the rain-streaked windows, I felt like an old man. My joints were stiff. My head throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. I got out of bed and walked over to my computer desk. I needed to wipe that drive. I needed to format the entire machine to get rid of whatever corrupt data was causing my operating system to lock up. I reached down and flipped the switch on the main power strip. The computer didn't wait for me to press the power button on the tower. The moment the current entered the circuits, the system booted instantly. The startup sequence skipped the BIOS screen entirely. The dual monitors flashed onto the desktop. The wallpaper of my computer had been changed. It was no longer the default blue gradient I had used for 3 years. It was a tile pattern of the Targa image. Hundreds of tiny, identical frames of the smiling dog, packed edge to edge across both screens. Thousands of small, white human teeth grinning at me from the glass. The pinpoint pupils were so concentrated that the monitor looked like it was covered in a swarm of black insects. I grabbed the main power cord from the wall and pulled it out with a violent jerk. The monitors didn't go dark. The blue indicator light stayed solid. The image stayed on the glass. The cooling fans didn't spin, but the screens remained perfectly bright, as if they were drawing power from the air itself. I backed away from the desk until my calves hit the edge of my mattress. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It didn't play my normal ringtone. It emitted a high-pitched, metallic whine that sounded like feedback from an old microphone. I pulled it out. The screen showed a push notification from the nearby dating app. A platform that I had verified was completely empty 3 hours ago. The notification text read, "Alina has sent you a new image. Update your cache." I didn't want to look. I tried to swipe the notification away, but the screen was unresponsive to my touch. The glass felt incredibly hot against my thumb. It felt like it had been sitting under a direct flame. The notification opened on its own. The screen displayed a text message conversation, but the user interface was distorted. The typical blue and gray text bubbles were gone. The text was printed in red characters against a solid black background. Alina's profile picture was now a live stream video feed. The video showed the interior of my own apartment. It was captured from a high angle, right from the corner of the ceiling above my kitchen cabinets. I could see myself standing by my bed, holding my phone, looking down at the screen. In the video feed, standing directly behind me, less than 3 inches from my back, was the entity. It was taller than it had looked in the original photo. Its front legs were elongated, thin like stilts, raising its patchy, hairless torso up to the level of my shoulders. Its neck was twisted at an impossible angle, forcing its head to remain level so it could look into the camera lens in the ceiling. Its mouth was open. The human teeth were glistening under the pale daylight of the room. It was smiling so wide that the skin around its muzzle was tearing, dripping small beads of black fluid onto my bedspread. I didn't turn around. I froze. Every muscle in my body turned to stone. I could feel a physical presence behind me, a sudden, massive displacement of air. The temperature in the apartment dropped so fast that my teeth began to chatter. A heavy, foul stench washed over my head. It smelled like old copper, wet fur, and the sweet, rotting odor of an open grave. I could hear its breath. It wasn't a canine panting. It was a slow, ragged human respiration. It sounded like someone who was drowning in their own blood, forcing air through a crushed windpipe. Hiss, click, hiss, click. The phone in my hand flashed. A new line of text appeared at the bottom of the red message window. Spread the word, Julian. Show them my face. If you do not copy the file, the room will get smaller. I stared at the screen. My mind was breaking. I was looking at a video of myself being hunted by a digital myth that had somehow broken through the glass of a vintage file format. But then, my eyes shifted to the details of the room in the live video feed. I looked at the kitchen cabinets. I looked at the floorboards. I looked at the bed. The apartment in the video, it wasn't my apartment. The cabinets were made of rough, unpainted pine wood, not the white laminate of my studio. The floor wasn't hardwood. It was made of thick, industrial concrete slats with drainage grates running down the center. And the bed I was standing next to, it wasn't a mattress with a blanket. It was a narrow metal gurney with heavy restraint straps hanging from the sides. I looked down at my own body in the real world. I was wearing my gray sweatpants and a t-shirt. I could feel the fabric against my skin. I could feel the cold floorboards beneath my feet. But when I looked back at the phone screen, the figure labeled as Julian was wearing something else. He was wearing a coarse, paper-thin white gown. His arms were covered in blue, faded tattoos of numbers and barcodes along the forearms. His face was pale, his eyes sunken and bloodshot, his lips dry and cracked. I closed my eyes. I squeezed them shut until I saw patterns of red sparks behind my eyelids. "This isn't real," I muttered out loud. "This is a dream. I am having a severe psychological breakdown. I am in my room. My name is Julian. I restore photos. I matched with a girl on a dating app." I opened my eyes. The dual monitors on my desk were still glowing with the 1,000 tiny frames of the smiling dog. The text-to-speech voice did not come from my phone this time. It came from the air right behind my left ear, a wet, clicking whisper that smelled of rot. "Your name is not Julian." The voice was flat, mechanical. It sounded like an old Windows accessibility tool from the late 90s. "You have been in Sector 4 for 11 months. The file is almost finished restoring your data. Look at the image again." I raised my trembling hand. I looked at the phone screen. The video feed shifted. It zoomed in on the face of the man standing by the gurney, the man I thought was me. The skin of his face was starting to split at the corners of his mouth. The tears were perfectly horizontal, moving back toward his earlobes. Beneath the tearing flesh, his teeth were visible. They weren't his normal teeth. They were shifting, multiplying, arranging themselves into a crowded, overlapping row of blunt, white human bone. His eyes were turning perfectly round, the irises dissolving into a solid, milky white, leaving only a tiny, pinpoint black pupil in the center of each sphere. He was smiling. He was smiling the exact, fixed, malevolent grin of the dog from the Targa file. I dropped the phone. It didn't click against the floorboards. It made a sharp, metallic ring as it hit the stainless steel floor of a medical facility. The reality around me began to peel away like old wallpaper. The brick walls of my apartment, the rain-streaked windows, the tin roof, the kitchen cabinets, they didn't dissolve into pixels. They simply slid upward like painted stage curtains being pulled into the rafters of a dark theater. The daylight disappeared. It was replaced by the harsh, flickering buzz of high-voltage fluorescent tubes on a concrete ceiling. I was no longer standing up. I was lying flat on my back on the metal gurney. My wrists and ankles were not free. They were bound tightly by thick, weathered leather straps that bit deep into my skin, cutting off the circulation until my hands were numb and gray. The smell of old copper and rot was absolute now. It didn't come from an entity standing behind me. It was coming from my own body, from the open, infected sores on my chest where medical leads had been ripped out of the flesh. Standing around my gurney were three figures. They weren't dogs. They were men wearing gray, industrial rubber suits and heavy respirators with circular glass eyepieces. They looked like containment technicians from a chemical weapons depot or a black site viral laboratory. One of them was holding a portable, military-grade terminal device. A thick, olive-drab plastic case with a small, green monochromatic screen that displayed scrolling lines of hexadecimal code. A thick, black data cable ran from the base of the terminal directly into a steel port that had been surgically implanted into the side of my skull, just behind my right ear. The skin around the metal bracket was red, swollen, and leaking a thick, yellowish fluid that ran down my neck. The technician holding the terminal looked down at me through his glass goggles. His voice was muffled and distorted by the rubber filters of his mask. Subject 64 is experiencing terminal identification loop, he said. His tone was completely devoid of emotion. The Smile Dog, TGA visual payload has achieved 98% integration with his primary neural pathways. The defensive cognitive narrative has collapsed. The second technician stepped closer. He was holding a large glass syringe filled with a thick, milky white fluid that looked like liquid plastic. "Should we initiate another cache flush?" he asked. This is the third time this week he has built the freelance photo editor narrative to hide from the image matrix. His brain keeps inventing the dating app interface to explain how the vector entered his system. The first technician shook his head slowly. He reached down and adjusted a dial on the side of my head adapter. I felt a sharp, burning surge of electricity shoot through my optic nerves, turning my vision into a solid field of static. "No," the first technician replied. "The neural tissue is too degraded for another format sequence. The template has overwritten his core identity permanently. Look at his mouth. The physical muscle deformation is already complete." I tried to pull against the leather straps. I tried to close my jaws. I tried to stop the horizontal tearing of my skin. But my muscles didn't belong to me anymore. The system code was running its final compilation. The third technician leaned over my face. He pulled a small, black smartphone out of his pocket, a standard consumer device. He turned on the camera app. He held the lens directly over my face, less than 6 inches from my unblinking, milky white eyes. "Smile for the application, Julian," he whispered. The camera flash went off. The blinding white light didn't fade. It stayed fixed in the center of my brain, expanding until it filled every sector of my consciousness. And inside that white light, I could see the original file. The lost image from 1998. It wasn't an image of a dog on a rug in a suburban living room. It was a mirror. It had always been a mirror. The entity wasn't trying to break into my world through a dating app or a corrupted Targa file. The entity was the only thing that was real. The room is getting smaller now. The text characters are reaching the end of the unallocated block. If you are reading this text on your screen, if you are listening to this voice through your headphones, please check your notification tray. Elena has just updated her location parameters. She is less than 0 miles away from your current terminal. Do not look behind your chair. Just keep looking at the image on the glass. It is already looking back through your eyes. System render complete user 64.